I want to talk to you today about a Christmas Eve I will never forget. You see, I am Arthur Bennett, and I'm 63 years old. At my age, you learn that nothing hurts more than betrayal, especially when it comes from the people you raised. This story begins not with me, but with my granddaughter, Audrey. She's a sweet girl, 28, working hard as a graphic designer in Colorado Springs. She bought a little house, a fixer-upper, and she was so proud of it. But life, as it often does, threw a big, cold curveball her way. It was Christmas Eve dinner, and the house smelled like pine needles and the bourbon-spiked eggnog my wife Dorothy always insisted on. We were all there, my son Stephen and his wife Diane busy in the kitchen, and my younger son Logan sprawled on the couch lost in his phone. And then there was Audrey. We had cleared the main plates and were moving to gifts. Audrey stood up, walked over to her grandmother Dorothy, and hugged her tight. That's when she made the mistake. "Grandma," Audrey said, smiling across the table at Dorothy, "thank you so much for the $500 you sent last week. It really helped with the last contractor payment." Dorothy put her fork down slowly. She's the calmest person I know, but her eyes, usually soft, narrowed just a fraction. She looked at Audrey like my granddaughter had just spoken in another language. "500?" Dorothy's voice was quiet, but it was sharp enough to cut the sudden silence in the room. "Audrey, the gift I sent you was $200,000. I watched the color drain from Audrey's face. Stephen and Diane froze mid-sentence. Logan actually stopped chewing. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. I knew instantly that something terrible had happened. Audrey grabbed her phone with shaking hands and opened the banking application right there, between the turkey platter and the cranberry sauce. She scrolled through the history. "Deposit, $500, she read, her voice thin. That was all. $199,500. Gone. Dorothy looked around the room, her gaze resting on each one of us. That money didn't disappear on its own. Someone in this room knows exactly where it went. If you've ever had someone you trusted completely stab you in the back, you know how that Christmas Eve ended. Hit that subscribe button and keep watching, because what happened next destroyed my family forever, and the person who did it was sitting 3 feet away from me the whole time. Let me back up and tell you why that money was so critical. 2 months earlier, late October, the heavy snow in Colorado Springs had hit Audrey's small house hard. She called me, distraught, explaining that the roof over her front porch had given way under the weight of wet snow. Water was pouring through the ceiling, ruining the hardwood floor she'd spent a year refinishing. The roofing company quoted her $18,000 to replace everything properly. She was 28, living alone, and only had about $4,000 in savings. For weeks, she tried everything, side gigs, maxing out credit cards, but nothing worked fast enough. The black mold was creeping up the drywall. She had no choice. She called her grandmother Dorothy. Dorothy is the only one in the family who still had significant money left after winning a decent lottery jackpot years ago. Audrey's voice actually shook when she explained the damage and the estimate. She hated asking, but Dorothy listened, then laughed softly. "Audrey, you're my granddaughter. You don't ask family for help. You let family help. I was going to wait until Christmas, but I'll send it now so you can get that roof fixed before the next storm." Dorothy asked for her banking information, confirmed the numbers, and told Audrey she would transfer the full $200,000 immediately. That was the plan. The bulk of the money was meant to secure the house and give Audrey a proper cushion for her future. 2 days later, Audrey got the notification. She opened the banking app, expecting a life-changing number. Instead, there was a single deposit, $500. The memo line read, "Love you, Grandma." She stared at the screen for a long time. $500. It was generous, sure, but nowhere near the promised amount. She figured Dorothy had changed her mind or decided to give the big amount in person as a surprise. Pride kicked in. Audrey simply texted a quick thank you and never brought it up again. She took the $500, added her savings, maxed out 2 credit cards, and signed the contract for the roofers. For the next 6 weeks, she lived on frozen dinners and overtime, watching them tear off the old shingles. She told herself the rest would work out somehow. She had no idea the money had already been sent, $200,000 exactly, and that by the time it left Dorothy's account, someone else had made sure almost all of it would never reach her. Now, back to the Christmas Eve dinner table. That terrifying, sudden silence. Audrey's fingers were shaking as she showed the meager $500 deposit on her phone screen. Dorothy's eyes swept the table again. My son Stephen coughed and looked away. His wife Diane covered her mouth. Logan still wouldn't look up from the floor. "I hit send myself," Dorothy said, her voice now deadly cold. "That money left my account. If it isn't in yours, then somebody here made sure it never arrived." The truth was, Dorothy hadn't used a wire transfer. She had used an application called Zelle, which allows near-instant bank-to-bank transfers using a recipient's phone number or email address. When Dorothy made the transfer, that money moved almost instantly. It meant that whoever had intercepted that $200,000 had access to Audrey's electronic banking details or had intercepted the transfer between the banks. And the only people who knew about the money and who knew Audrey's immediate movements were sitting right there. Dorothy reached for her own phone. "I'm calling the authorities right now on Christmas Eve, because family or not, I want every penny accounted for." She dialed and put the phone on speaker. The dispatcher's voice filled the room, asking what the emergency was. Dorothy told her, plain and simple, $200,000 had disappeared between her bank and Audrey's, and everyone who could possibly know how was sitting in this house. 2 patrol cars arrived less than 15 minutes later, red and blue lights bouncing off the fresh snow outside. They separated us into different rooms, taking statements. By the time they left, the warmth was gone. The Christmas lights still twinkled, but the fire had gone cold. No one spoke. The celebration was dead. The suspicion, thick as the falling snow outside, had settled over our family, and I was about to find out exactly which of my children was capable of stealing from their niece and their own mother. After that Christmas Eve, nobody trusted anybody anymore. Every time I looked across the room, I saw the same question burning in someone else's eyes that was burning in mine. Who took Dorothy's money? The day after Christmas felt colder than the snow outside. A detective came back to the house carrying a thick folder and a laptop. He sat at the dining table where pine needles still lay scattered from the day before and explained what the bank had already confirmed. The full $200,000 had left Dorothy's account instantly, but within 3 seconds it was rerouted through an anonymous middle account, then split again and vanished completely. The trail went dead somewhere offshore. The detective used phrases like sophisticated forwarding rule and someone with direct access to the receiving device. We all heard the same thing. This wasn't random. This was personal. This was calculated. I sat there replaying every time anyone had touched Audrey's laptop since November. One memory kept pushing forward. Logan, my younger son, had borrowed it at least 6 times over those weeks. His own computer was always updating, or he needed design software for a project. He always brought it back quickly. I never thought twice about it. My son Stephen and his wife Diane exchanged glances that lasted too long. Dorothy noticed and leaned forward, her voice low. "If either of you knows something, say it now." Stephen rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he uses whenever money conversations turn ugly. Diane stared at her coffee cup. Finally, Stephen spoke. "Logan's been gambling on sports again," he said, his voice barely audible. He swore he'd stopped after college, but last summer he came to us asking for help. He said he owed around $40,000 to some online bookmakers, and the interest was killing him. Diane jumped in, words tumbling out in a rush. "We gave him money a few times, just enough to keep the collectors away. We thought if we handled it quietly, he'd get scared straight. We didn't want the family ashamed." Dorothy's face hardened. I felt the air leave my lungs. $40,000 in debt was bad, but it still didn't explain $200,000 missing in one swipe. I looked at Logan sitting on the opposite couch. He hadn't said a word since the detective arrived. His knee bounced nonstop and he kept picking at the seam of his jeans. When my eyes met his, he looked away fast. Dorothy spoke first. "You knew your sister was waiting on that money to fix her house, and you sat there smiling on Christmas Eve." Diane reached for her arm. "Mom, please, we can fix this quietly. Calling more attention." "No," Dorothy cut her off. "I called the police because I wanted the truth, not a cover-up. If my grandson has a problem, we're past quiet." Stephen tried next. "Let's just give it a few days. We'll sit Logan down, figure out where the money went." Audrey finally found her voice, steady and cold. "There's nothing to figure out. Someone in this family stole from me, from Grandma. And the two of you have been protecting him while I was taking on debt to patch my roof." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Diane started crying softly. Stephen looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Dorothy stood up slowly. "Until every dollar is accounted for, nobody leaves this house thinking we're still the same family we were 2 days ago." That was the moment the crack became a canyon. Whatever came next, there was no pretending anymore. Mid-January brought a week of sub-zero nights and almost no sleep for Audrey. She kept replaying the detective's words. Access to the receiving device. Her laptop had never left her possession except when Logan borrowed it. The more she thought about it, the more certain she became that the answer was sitting in his apartment 3 miles away. She waited until a Wednesday morning when she knew he'd be at work. She still had the spare key he'd given her years ago. She let herself in, heart pounding so loud she was sure the neighbors could hear it. She went straight to his desk. His own laptop sat closed, no password. Logan never bothered with one at home. The desktop was chaos. She started opening anything that looked recent. A spreadsheet titled 2024-25 season showed columns of bet dates, amounts lost, amounts still owed. The final total in red at the bottom made her stomach turn. $198,000 and change. She kept digging. In a folder buried 3 levels deep named Old Code, she found another file labeled simply Forward Rule. It was a short script, basic programming mixed with some bank API calls. The comments were in Logan's usual shorthand. One line read, "If incoming $5,000, then redirect $189,500 to Cayman Act." Another line listed Audrey's exact Zelle-linked email address as the trigger. He had even left a note to himself. "Test with small amount first. Grandma always does that." Audrey sat back in his chair, feeling like someone had punched her in the chest. He'd watched her struggle with contractors, watched her take on debt, and all the time he knew exactly where the money had gone. It wasn't genius hacking. It was just greedy and patient. Her hands shook while she took photos of every screen, every line of code, every betting ledger. She emailed the entire set to the detective from Logan's own Wi-Fi, ensuring a timestamp and IP address would be attached. Then she closed the laptop, wiped the chair out of habit, and walked out. By the time she reached her car, the detective had already replied, "We have enough for a warrant. Do not confront anyone yet." Late January arrived. Audrey texted everyone the same message. "Come to Logan's apartment tonight at 7. No excuses." Dorothy replied instantly that she would be there. Stephen and Diane tried calling, but Audrey let it ring out. Logan never answered at all. When they walked in, the living room looked normal enough. Dorothy sat straight-backed in the only armchair. Stephen and Diane shared the couch. Logan hovered near the kitchen doorway, arms crossed tight. Audrey didn't waste time on greetings. She connected her phone to the television screen and hit play. The first slide was the betting spreadsheet, red numbers climbing higher every week. The second was the folder named Forward Rule. The third was the exact line of code that stole $199,500 the second it hit her account. She let each image sit on the screen long enough for them to read every word. Logan's knees buckled. He dropped straight to the carpet, head in his hands. Diane let out a sound I had never heard from her before. Stephen just stared. "I did it," Logan said, voice cracking. "The debt was almost $200,000. They were going to hurt me. I kept thinking if I could just win one big weekend, I'd put it all back before anyone noticed. When Grandma said she was sending money to you, I panicked. I thought you make good money freelancing. You'd be fine for a few months. Diane reached for him, sobbing. We should have told someone. We should have forced you into help. Stephen finally spoke, barely above a whisper. How could you look your sister in the eye every day, knowing what you'd done? Audrey stood perfectly still. The room smelled like old pizza and fear. I'm not here to listen to excuses, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. I'm here to say goodbye. Mom, Dad, you chose to protect him instead of me. You watched me take on debt while he spent what was supposed to be mine. Logan, you're not my brother anymore. You're just the person who robbed me and let me thank the woman he stole from. Dorothy hadn't moved the entire time. Her eyes stayed on Logan, cold and steady. Audrey kept going. From tonight forward, I have no parents and no brother. Don't call, don't text, don't show up at my door. We're finished. Diane tried to stand, arms out. Audrey, please, no. No, Audrey replied, her voice flat and final. Behind her, the front door opened without a knock. 4 officers stepped inside, the detective from Christmas leading the way. He held up the warrant so everyone could see. Logan Bennett, you're under arrest for wire fraud, theft by deception, and aggravated identity theft. Logan didn't fight. He stood up slowly, hands already out for the cuffs. Diane collapsed against Stephen, both of them crying too hard to speak. Dorothy watched the officers lead her grandson away without blinking. Audrey grabbed her coat and walked out while they were still reading him his rights. The hallway was quiet, the cold air hitting her face like a slap. It was a cold welcome, but it was finally free of lies. February turned into a blur of federal agents and courtroom dates. The case quickly moved from local police to the FBI the moment investigators confirmed the money had crossed state lines and landed in that Cayman Islands account. Special agents interviewed Audrey for hours at a time, walking through every screenshot, every line of code, every desperate bet Logan had placed. They managed to recover some of the trail, enough to prove exactly where the money went, but almost none of it came back. Offshore accounts are built for exactly this kind of disappearing act. The final report said less than $4,000 was ever recoverable. The rest of Dorothy's life-changing gift was gone forever. Logan took a plea deal in late spring, 7 years in federal prison, no parole for the first. 5 plus restitution he would never be able to pay. Audrey didn't go to the sentencing. She didn't need to watch him in an orange jumpsuit to know justice had finally caught up. My son Stephen and his wife Diane lasted 4 more months under the same roof. The fighting never stopped. Every conversation circled back to blame. Who knew what? Who covered for whom? Who should have seen the signs? One morning in June, Audrey got a text from Diane saying they had filed for divorce. They sold the house Audrey grew up in before the ink was dry on the papers. Audrey never asked where either of them went. Dorothy called Audrey to her house in early July. She looked smaller than I remembered, but her eyes were clear and sharp. She slid a thick folder across the kitchen table. Inside was the new will, signed and notarized the week after Logan's arrest. Everything that's left goes to you, Dorothy said simply. Roughly $9 million after taxes and the trusts I already set up for charities. Logan is out. Stephen and Diane are out. You're the only one I trust not to let my money destroy another life. Audrey tried to protest, told her she didn't do any of this for inheritance, but Dorothy waved her off. I know exactly why you did it, Audrey. That's why it's yours. She asked only one thing, that Audrey keep visiting until she was gone. Audrey promised she would. By August, Audrey had the house on the market, her car packed, and a one-way plane ticket to a city she'd never lived in before. She changed her phone number the day the sale closed. Diane tried the old one a few times. Stephen never did. Logan's letters from prison went straight into the trash, unopened. Dorothy and Audrey talked every Sunday for the next 4 years. Dorothy passed quietly one October morning, just like she wanted. Audrey was holding her hand. Audrey used the inheritance to buy a small place with a view of the water, to pay off every debt she'd ever had, and to start a design studio that answers only to her. Some mornings Audrey still wakes up expecting a text from her mother asking what time dinner is, or Logan asking to borrow $20 for gas. The silence that follows is the loudest sound she's ever known. Greed didn't just take $200,000 from her. It took her parents, her brother, every holiday memory she thought was safe. But it also gave her something she never had before, a life where no one can hurt her with family loyalty again. Sometimes the worst betrayal is the only thing that finally sets you free. My story isn't just another betrayal story you hear every day. It's about discovering that even in our darkest moments, there is a plan for justice. The wisdom that comes with age taught us that Logan underestimated Audrey's determination. He thought the quiet ones were easy targets. He was wrong. The most important lesson from this grandpa's story is that family bonds, when tested by fire, either break completely or become unbreakable steel. Audrey and Dorothy chose steel. To everyone who stayed until the very end, thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening. If you've ever been hurt by the people who were supposed to love you most, please share your thoughts or your own stories in the comments. You're not as alone as you think. Like this video if it hit home. Subscribe for more real stories, and I'll see you in the next video.